Well, occupancy loads are important. They give us the number of people that can occupy a given space. However, every occupancy has different requirements. So the occupant load is based on two primary factors. That being how many people can we get into that given space based on its occupancy, and then for the square footage. So we'd have to look at the square footage in the code to see how many people are allowed per square foot, and then we'd get a number, and we would usually go in and say, okay, length times width, we subtract the permanent objects, and we come up with a number of people that can occupy that space. The second factor is, do we have enough door capacity width to accommodate that number of people? So typically when we do an occupant load, if we go in and we calculate that number for the floor area, we then come back and we say, okay, do we have enough door capacity width? And there's some math that goes into that, and we find out, for instance, that there's not enough capacity width, and we're going to lower the occupant load to accommodate the doors. So we're always going to be very conservative with our numbers. The occupant load is based on the occupancy itself, and the occupancy is determined by the use of the building. So we may have a large structure. Let's say we just have a large square building. Depending on what we use, it is going to depend on the factor or the square footage per person. So for instance, for most assembly occupancies, nightclubs, churches, restaurants, we're going to have a factor of 7 to 15 square feet per person, and 7's if everybody's just standing next to each other, and 15 square feet per person for tables and chairs. Whereas if we went to a business, we took that same shell and we said, okay, it's a business occupancy just for doing routine business. It's going to be at 100 square feet per person, and we don't take out fixed objects. It's just the gross square footage at 15. So it's really the use which determines the occupancy, and the occupancy, you go to a chart of occupant loads for that given use, and it tells you how many square feet per person. Impediments, some of the things that we'll find on during an inspection. Fixed objects contribute. Obviously, if we have we have a nightclub with bars and tables and pool tables, you can't walk and you can't occupy that space. So in that instance, we would subtract that out to get your actual available square footage. First is adding on to the existing floor print of the building, or changing the occupancy. Okay. However, removing fixed objects, removing impediments. Sometimes if you want to change out some of your building space and you want to have more people, but you want to keep the same footprint, maybe you want to move some walls and some fixed objects out of the way. But that's really about it. Other than changing the occupancy, we often have building where somebody's got some sort of occupancy, like a school, and later on that building becomes unoccupied, and then they want to make it a gymnasium or something like that. Well, then obviously the factor changes, and what you can do with that building changes, as well as the occupant load. So those are the types of things that we would look at in order to make an increase. The occupant load of the building typically determines whether or not a fire alarm system or a sprinkler system is required. There's a lot of misnomers that we seem to think that if our building has sprinklers, we can add more people, or we can do certain things to our buildings. That's not true. The square footage requirements and the capacity width requirements all stay the same. So if I have a given space and I have enough doors and I have enough square footage to occupy with people, well, then that solely determines the occupant load, and then that number is whether or not we get triggered into a sprinkler system or a fire alarm system. It's not the opposite way around. So if I have a small building and it can only accommodate 100 people, but it's a sprinklered building, that doesn't mean I can add people to it. I'm still set to the parameters of the square footage and the occupiable door width. What's important with fire protection systems is that fire protection systems are there to protect people, not the building. Oftentimes we have a lot of people coming into the office saying, nothing's going to burn in here. It's solid concrete walls, or it's brick. Well, the protection systems are there to protect you. You're not solid brick. You're flesh and bones. So the systems like sprinklers and fire alarms, the name of the game is getting out of the building. So it's notification and suppression if it's required by the occupant load. But the name of the game for us is getting out of the structure. Firefighting is for firefighters. It's not for the occupants of the building. Fire suppression systems and fire alarm systems are generally required at a level of occupant load. Okay, so we came up with those factors to determine what our occupant load is going to be. And then we have to look at the occupancy and the use. And then we determine, yes, it needs a fire alarm system, or no, it doesn't, or a sprinkler system. In most occupancies that are assemblies, the churches, the bars, the restaurants, you get over 100, and at 100 occupants, that triggers the installation of a sprinkler system. Typically, we want all of our schools to be protected. So we're always going to require, at a minimum, notification alarms so people can get out, and all new schools are required to have full sprinkler systems. So as we've changed and building materials change and the number of people increase, certain occupancies by code are required to have certain types of systems. So there isn't like one answer that we can give to say, okay, every occupancy at this level has to have that system requirement. So we always tell people, regardless of what your project is, you need to come in and talk to us here at the fire marshal's office so we can show you where in the code these requirements are and why they exist. Small businesses, we don't typically require suppression systems. We do start getting into that when we start getting into mixed use. So maybe you have retail, and then upstairs you're going to have some sort of living facility. As an example, in my home, I have interconnected hardwired smoke detection. So if a smoke detector goes off in one of my kids' rooms, I get notified in my room, and so it acts as a system. So you should always, in a home, we should always have a working smoke detector in every sleeping room and in the vicinity of. Additionally, if we have gas in our home through a water heater or cooking, we should have carbon monoxide detectors. And so for a very low price, you can actually have these things installed by a licensed electrician, and then you can actually turn this into your insurance company and get a rebate on your insurance, on your homeowner's insurance. So it's a very good thing to do. A lot of people think that when you go over to the wall and you pull that little red lever down, you're going to activate the sprinklers. That couldn't be further from the truth. What you're activating is noise and visual alerts. So we have audio visual devices that you'll typically see in schools, businesses, and so forth. And what you're doing is we strategically by code put those by exit doors or in the paths of exit so that you can get on your way. You can activate the system, put the building into alarm, and get people to evacuate. What we often see, though, is we see false alarms. We see people setting off fire alarm systems in businesses by popping popcorn in microwaves or smoking near an exit where you have a smoke detection device and setting off those alarms. And then we get accustomed to it just being an alarm and, there's really not a fire. So we need to kind of retrain ourselves to be more cognizant that each time that alarm goes off, even if it's a false alarm, we need to exit the building each time and every time. Those alarm devices have to ring at a minimum of 85 decibels, so 85 to 110 is what they're typically set at. And you should see, when you walk through a building, when you walk out into a corridor of a large office building, you should see audio-visual devices in the corridors, either on the walls or mounted to the ceiling. And they should have noise and a lot of light. And it's to alert you, to help you get out and remind you, hey, it's time to go. If smoke detection is in the building, and smoke detection is not always required in business occupancies, okay? If that lever is not working and you don't have smoke detection, then there's a problem, and we need to get the fire alarm checked out by a licensed fire alarm company. Now, regardless of the occupancy, a fire alarm panel, the main brain for the system, is required to have a smoke detector located in proximity to it. Thereby, if there is a fire in that room, the smoke detector will go off, alert the system, put the system into alarm before it burns up. So that's the idea of that. So if you pull that station and it doesn't work, you're going to have a problem with your fire alarm system, and it needs to be examined. Sprinklers are only activated by heat. Each sprinkler head is heat rated. So most of your heads in your business occupancies are about 165 degrees. Now, we've talked many times about the misnomers of sprinkler systems. When one sprinkler head goes off, it's only the affected head, the head that's affected by the heat source that goes off. They don't all go off. So typically in your James Bond movies or your Jack in the Box commercials, you'll see somebody either pull a pull station, you'll see a whole sprinkler system goes off. Well, that's not how they're designed to work. Everybody's always afraid that if they put that sprinkler in their building, they're going to flood out their stuff, whether it's archives and records or art museums and so forth. But they're never going to do that. This has been tested time and time again. They either have a fusible link or they have a frangible bulb, and it breaks on the temperature, on a certain temperature rating, and then that's when the water flows out of that head. Otherwise, all the other heads around it are going to be fine until they reach a point where the heat triggers their actuating mechanisms. What we have here is we have our main entrance exit to the convention center. And you can see we're denoted by exit signs located above. And anytime in any building, you always want to have a minimum of 2 ways out. So when you walk out into a corridor, you should be able to look either way and see something that indicates direction for the occupant to get out of the building. And in doing so, once you walk up to your door, it should take one motion to put a door in motion. So quite often, you'll see this type of device. You have 2 types of hardware. It's either panic hardware or fire exit hardware. They look exactly the same. Most often, fire exit hardware is going to be a fire rated hardware. It's going to have a UL listing, and it is going to look exactly like this, but it's going to be on interior doors. And the reason why it's on interior doors is because the hardware is rated, and it's rated to match the integrity of the wall so that you have a fire barrier, so that if you're trying to exit, when you go up and you hit that door, you don't have to worry about malfunctions because of heat. One of the ways to denote it is you'll see a small hole right here. And whenever you have this hole, that's so that you can dog the door down in the open position. And this is only allowed on panic hardware. And panic hardware, looking just like fire exit hardware, is going to be on exterior doors only. So as an example, if I walk up to the door, it should take one motion to put this door in motion and for me to get to the outside. And that's what's the most important thing. We often go up to doors in business and assembly occupancies, and we see a device like this, but then we see key double cylinder deadbolt locks, we see thumb latches, and we see other things. If I go up to a door, it should not take a tool, special knowledge, or effort to unlock the door and put the door in motion. If I have to do multiple operations, we're going to deem the door is not up to code. Now, likewise, on some businesses, you are allowed to have a double cylinder lock requiring a key on the inside to unlock, providing that you have nothing else. All you have to do is push the outside leaf of the door to put it in motion, and that you have a sign on the inside that says this door will remain unlocked during business hours. Most businesses should have a parking lot or a designated area where they can go to and meet and then have accountability. The problem with that in most jurisdictions is, where's the fire department coming in? Where are they going to be moving into this area? Because we certainly don't want to evacuate a large number of people from a business right in the way of where the fire department's going to set up and start their fire department operation and their firefighting suppression activities. So we need to be kind of smart and strategic and make sure that we have that point of safety in a kind of an unobtrusive area that's not really, doesn't have a lot of vehicular traffic, and we can get people there, they can be accounted for, and they can be safe. So number of exits, clear passageways. We don't want a lot of obstructions in the way. Often when we do inspections, we look down hallways and we see copy machines and shelving units and chairs and so forth. Well, corridors are for walking. They're not for stores. They're not copy rooms and so forth. So when we design a building, we make sure that we have adequate capacity width to accommodate the doors. So typically in the design and architecture and engineering, Well, if we have a double set of doors, we're going to have a corridor that's no less than that to accommodate that number of people. So when we start putting all these things in that corridor, we are in fact blocking our exit. Okay, so we always say, hey, we build a good building and then we put people in them. So we'll build a nice building, and then we as people, creatures of habit, we come in and we want access to things. So we'll put stuff in our hallways, we'll put stuff in corridors, and we're actually obstructing our egress and our ability to exit the building safely. But when you go to your restaurants and you sit down, you need to realize that the door you came in may not be the best way out. You need to condition yourself to look for other options. Most often we go in a door, we sit down, and we're trained to go right back out the same door. We don't think about the other options. Same thing when we go to grocery stores, when we go to the malls. We're creatures of habit. We tend to park in the same places. We tend to drive the same ways. We tend to go out the same door we came in, and kind of need to break that up and be mindful of other options, because if something happens, it's estimated that half of the occupants are going to go toward that main entrance exit, the place they came in, and we're going to have a bottleneck effect and we're going to get stuck. Drills need to be conducted often, and the best thing to do with a drill is not notify everybody that you're going to do them. I remember as a child being in school and having our teacher come in and say, hey, we're going to be doing a fire drill today. I want everybody to line up orderly by the door. When the bell rings, we're all going to go outside and we're going to behave and this type of thing. Well, in a real fire situation, we're not going to be notified. We're not going to line up at the door, and we're not going to be orderly. So the best thing to do is to keep the fire drills and the release and actuation of that drill to just one or two people. Use the fire alarm devices provided that's at the building to activate, because obviously when you have a real fire, it's going to be the system that goes off. It's not going to be a person saying, hey, we're in a drill right now. So use your systems, do it often, do it monthly, do it quarterly at a minimum. Most of these systems are monitored systems, which means that they're paying a provider, and that provider is monitoring alarms for many buildings, and then they notify 911 when there's a fire alarm activation. So a good time to always do a drill is when your fire alarm company comes out to do an inspection. Okay, then that way they can notify their company and let them know, hey, we're going to do a drill, so don't notify 911, or get your fire marshal's office involved, or the fire department. Say, hey, we'd like to have a drill and we'd like to have you guys come out, and that way they won't notify the emergency services. They'll do the drill and they'll test the system at the same time. So that's really the best way, is to have your provider do that, especially in our school settings, because we don't want to upset students or get people alarmed unnecessarily. When we have an incident like a suspicious package, our method of operation is to evacuate those in proximity to that package. And so quite often we will approach an apartment building or nearby businesses, and we will tell you that, hey, we have an event happening. We're not always going to tell the people what it is, because we don't want to get people frantic and upset, but we're going to give you direction. You need to leave the building right now, lock it up, and go. And sometimes we've had to get a little aggressive with people, because we're by and large having to tell them to vacate their business or their home, and that's uncomfortable for them, and they're trying to run an operation or make money, and we completely understand that. But when we give that type of direction, just listen to us, listen to what public safety is telling you, and get out of the area. It's for your best interest, and it will also help firefighting operations and police activity, because we don't have to worry about those people. So typically in this area, we're kind of in the cusp here between Central and West Texas. We're kind of the beginning of West Texas here. So we kind of enjoy a dry a dry climate, and every now and then we have some seasonal humidity. But overall for this area, our humidity is relatively low. So when you start getting a KBDI reading of 575 or greater, that gives counties the ability to enact a burn ban. When things are sustained at 575 or greater for long periods of time, we get a lot of dry vegetation on the ground. It stays there, it dries out, and with our mix of winds here in West Texas, something as simple as discarding a cigarette could cause a large wildland fire, and then it could just be propelled by exacerbating wind conditions and that hot, dry seasonal grasses that we see and so forth. We start talking about the fireworks season. If you're already in a burn ban, a county judge can declare a local state of disaster and actually restrict the sale or use of fireworks in a particular county. It's happened recently over the past couple of years with the wildland fires and the drought conditions that we've seen in Central Texas. But they try to use that sparingly because there's a lot of money involved with fireworks, and it's a big industry, and it's the one time where people can go out and celebrate Americana. We're not required to follow the county burn ban because we have our own ordinances and so forth, but we try to get very mindful and recognize when they have a burn ban and try to put similar restrictions in place. So typically when there's a burn ban, get a lot of questions about grilling, outdoor grilling. And grilling is fine even during a burn ban. However, we want people to be smart and safe about it. So what we recommend is that you not use a combustible fuel source like wood or coal. We recommend you use propane. And the reason why we ask you to use a chemical is that way you can control it and you can cut the gas off if something happens. We're in a typical backyard here in San Angelo, Texas, and we've got our typical gas grill that we see. And in this instance, you can tell that the grill is in really close proximity to the house. So over here, we've got a wooden exterior finish. We have a wooden soffit and eaves. So this is really kind of a dangerous situation. It's not something we always like to see. So in a second, we're going to move this a proper distance. I've got my measuring tape here, so you can see that the distance here is just about 50 inches, a little over 4 feet. So we're in really way too close proximity. We do not have any type of cover in this area, so we're kind of in the middle here. This is not the best situation. So before we get started with our grilling, we want to really come back and look at the back. And as you can see, we have a typical gas grill that you'll see in many homes here. And we want to look at our connections. This is a little bit loose. We're going to tighten that on a little bit. We're going to look at our hose. The fittings here is tight. All these fittings are tight. Come back down here. Right now the grill's not being used, so we are in the closed position. That's good. And this is secured. You know, they make these grills now where they have cutouts so that you can fit your tank in. It's nice and secured, and we don't have to worry about any type of tipping over. Sometimes we use deep fat fryers and that type of thing during the holidays. So anytime we're using those, we want to make sure that we have a tank that is secured and is not going to be deemed vulnerable to tipping over. That's always important, because if it tips over, the valve could shear and then we're going to have loose gas. So if you come outside at any time and you are grilling, you always want to check your connections first. Make sure everything's nice and secured. Over time, these little rubber lines will crack, which requires some replacement. And this is a little bleeder valve here, and it just kind of helps regulate the oxygen flow with the fuel. So right now we're good and secure. The other thing is, once the grill is going, we want to make sure that we don't smell gas. If your grill is on and you smell gas, you want to back away immediately and call 911 and get the fire department on site to help you out. The other thing we want to look at is we have it's called a grease trap. You'll see these in many grills. This one right here, it's kind of stuck in place. It's got a lot of debris and residue. So this is a grill that's presents the evidence needing to get it cleaned out. You've also got a drip tray back here, which is further. Got a lot of grease and fat. And so this can cause a fire. So if you get some fuel on here and you get any types of flames, you can have a full-blown fire just by the residue that's created here. So the next step is, so let's make this a safe thing to do. So now what we've done is we've moved this. We're approximately 10 feet away from the house, which is a very safe distance away from combustibles. If you look up, you'll notice that we're not around any other combustible items, no trees or anything like that. And what we've done here, we've checked our hoses. Everything looks good. We're just about ready. And then most important thing is we have a water hose handy. So you don't have to turn your water hose on, but you need to have a fire extinguisher or some water handy in case something happens, and you just want to have it in proximity. We have very dry conditions here in San Angelo. Even though we've had the previous rains, we need to make sure that we can handle any type of fire and go ahead and start mitigating our problems. So you don't have to turn the water on, but you got your hose handy. The grill is on a non-combustible surface. Even though we have some grass on each side of us, we've got the grill on a straight flat surface. So we can either put it on a concrete pad, put it on some paver stones, or some gravel. Anything that we can have that's a non-combustible surface, and we're ready to go. You need to call the fire marshal's office first. Okay, that's number one. You have to get a permit to burn from the fire marshal's office inside the city limits of San Angelo. And what we do with that is we have you come in because we want to go out and we want to look at what you're wanting to burn. We want to make sure you're not going to burn building materials or things that cause environmental issues. Typically the burning of brush, we want to go out and we want to look at it. We want to give you size recommendations for your pile. We want to make sure that you have some sort of fire break where you've either dug out or been able to remove anything in the immediate area that could catch on fire while this thing is going on. Now we want to make sure that you have the ability to extinguish a fire if you need to. So some people in outlying areas of the city may be able to call a volunteer fire department to see if they'll stand by, some of your local farmers and so forth. And most of the farmers have nice heavy equipment, so they're able to move stuff away, create fire breaks, move items away. But if we see somebody who wants to burn something and it's real close to their house, we're going to set some distance requirements, which is pretty hard to do in a residential setting. We're going to look at 300 feet. And we're going to look at, how safe are you going to be? What are you prepared to do this? Do you understand the size of how are you going to ignite it and light it? Those types of things. So we want to permit the process. We want to make sure that it's safe and that you're going to be successful with what you're doing, and we don't cause any serious bodily injury to anybody, and we don't have an accidental cause on a house or any type of structure. The best thing is to call 325-657-4358, call the fire marshal's office and ask for an inspector, or ask to speak to the fire marshal, which is me, and let us talk to you about your information. Sometimes, though, we need to, it's hard for us to put together what you're requesting, what you're asking for us without us making a site visit. So we may make a site visit. Now, those are free consultations. We don't charge you for just coming out to give you some information. We do have an inspection fee, but if you just want to find out general information, what you need to do, how to prepare, call the office. The other thing is that for business owners that are making a change to their business, or they're going to be adding on space or wanting to change configuration, we have a development review committee here. And development review committee consists of people from the fire marshal's office, planning and zoning, engineering, stormwater, and the building official's office. And that's a free of charge service where you can schedule a meeting. It's usually on Fridays. You can come to our office, you can put your building plans out, and you can just basically say, this is what I want to do. Is this acceptable? What do I have to do to make this happen? And then we can give you, well, these are some things you'll be looking at, or you may have some drainage issues, and we have somebody from every department there to help you put that into motion. And or you may find out that's not something you want to do. So that's really the best methods, is the DRC, the Development Review Committee, or just calling the office and making the inquiries and letting us talk to you. We don't want you to get down the road and end up having a problem that could cause an accident, a fire, or some other related emergency, when you could have just called here and just had a simple request, and we can give you the proper guidance to do it safely.